Ashley, I know you wrote an article, really interesting. Browns offense needs to answer some underrated questions, and I'll run through them and we can go through them. So how will they run Deshaun Watson, number one? What will they do with the running back room and the contracts? What will they look like, and how do they improve it? And three, how do they tackle the turnover problem? And those are huge, huge questions.
Yeah, I mean, I think too, it's like we look at this offense right now, and I think what everyone is focused on, maybe like rightly so, is wondering who is going to call the plays and wondering how Deshaun Watson is going to look coming back from his shoulder injury. And there's actually one other question I left off of there, which is what are they going to do at tackle? Because I think they're going to have three starting caliber tackles, and how are you going to afford that? Can you afford that? Do you have to trade somebody? I think that's a valuable question as well. But yeah, the goal of this was just looking at maybe some of these things we aren't thinking about yet, but to me, they're going to be pretty big questions. So first, to start with running Deshaun. I mean, he's a physical runner throughout his career. We know that new offensive coordinator Ken Dorsey has worked with other physical running quarterbacks in Cam Newton and Josh Allen. And I think it's interesting knowing that Deshaun Watson is going to be coming off of this shoulder injury, for which there really isn't a precedent, especially among quarterbacks, to have a glenoid bone fracture in your throwing shoulder. I couldn't find another quarterback. I think a bunch of us looked for it. We could not find another NFL quarterback that had this specific injury. It's pretty rare. But I wonder then, okay, how many hits do you want him to take? How physical do you want him to be? I thought it was interesting when Ken Dorsey was in Buffalo this past year calling plays before they moved on from him. It seemed like they were running Josh Allen a bit less, a bit differently, trying to avoid putting the tread on those tires so quickly. So I think that's really interesting to me. Just how are they going to do it? How conservative are they going to be? How much is Deshaun still going to want to run? Because that is a really, really, really important part of his game. And then beyond that, in the running backs room, I think it's an interesting question of, do you bring Kareem Hunt back? I think you could probably get him for the cheap still, or on the cheap still. I don't know how much he would truly command in the free agency market. But the Nick Chubb contract is still, I think, as Andrew Berry called it, the elephant in the room for the Browns and this offense, because I think everyone looks at the cap hit Nick would take next year for the team versus like what his dead cap number would be. I think even Spotrac potentially has this listed as a potential out year is the language they use for the team. But I would be, I do not think there's any world where the Browns would move on from Nick Chubb. Andrew Berry just basically said as much during his season wrap-up press conference. It sounds like they really want to do right by Nick Chubb, and they should. He's a face of their franchise. He really, I think, is a fan favorite for a reason, and he is the best running back in football right now. I think if you ask a lot of people, myself included. So in the running aspect of things, those are 2 points that are really, really interesting to me going forward as we go through this offseason and get into offseason workouts.